Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to warmly welcome you on behalf of His Excellency Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, Ambassador of India to Sweden and Latvia, and on behalf of Mrs. Mahatma Sajjanhar to India House and at a talk by Ambassador Pascal à la Nazareth. And to start with, I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Sajjanhar to say it.
Thank you very much, Zavile. Dear friends, let me say what a great pleasure and what a great delight it is to welcome each and every one of you here. On my behalf, on behalf of my wife, and of course on behalf of the Embassy of India. We are of course truly delighted that we have Ambassador Nazareth with us. He has just arrived early this afternoon, and I'm so happy, so delighted that he has agreed to come and address us. Of course, it's also a great pleasure to see our friends from the Swedish Foreign Office here, from other Swedish ministries and agencies, organizations, universities, think tanks, media, etc. And I would of course like to express a special welcome to our dear friends, colleagues from the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador of Turkey, South Africa, Kenya, and so many others. And it's such a great pleasure. Thank you so much for responding to our invitation. I must apologize, I will not mention all the names, but of course all the friends know that we are here. I would also like to welcome members of the Indian community here who have come to listen to the talk by Ambassador Nazareth. Friends, volumes have been written on Mahatma Gandhi by scholars, by statesmen, by philosophers, by social and political activists. He was named as the man of the millennium, he was named as the man of the century by BBC, by Time magazine, by several other reputed institutions and organizations. Gandhi's birthday, 2nd October, was decided by the United Nations in 2007 to be celebrated as the International Day of Peace and Non-Violence. Generations and countless millions have been inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's teachings of ahimsa or non-violence and satyagraha, or as he translated it himself, into love force or passive resistance or moral force or truth force, which he perfected during his 20-odd years in South Africa from 1893 to 1915 when he came back to India. But looking at this distance, because Mahatma Gandhi, he was assassinated in 1948, and it's about 64 years since he passed away. Looking back, it is a little difficult to assess and evaluate the essence of his teachings. Because after all, Mahatma Gandhi, he was not the president or the prime minister of any country. He was not an emperor. He was not a military general. He was not a pacifist or a demagogue. He was not a godman or an ideologue. So it's a little difficult to compartmentalize or appreciate the essence of his teachings. But the basic pillar of his philosophy was a constant search for truth. He identified truth as God, and for him, non-violence was the highest truth. In fact, the famous physicist Albert Einstein, at his death, said, "Generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this walked in flesh and blood on this earth." I think I can do no better to speak about briefly about Mahatma Gandhi than to mention two of his teachings, two of his sayings. And the first one of that is what he said: be the change that you wish to see in this world. I think at that time and even today, we tend to criticize and condemn what is happening around us, but we don't look within to change ourselves. And Mahatma Gandhi said that action is better than teaching or pronouncement. There is a story which says that a woman brought her young son to Mahatma Gandhi and said, please, and said, Babu, please tell him to stop eating sugar. He eats too much of sugar. And Mahatma Gandhi looked first at that woman, then he looked at the child, and he said, okay, come back after 3 days. And they came back after 3 days. And Gandhi looked in the eyes of the young boy and said, don't eat sugar, it's bad for you. And the mother said, Babu, you could have said the same thing 3 days ago when we came. He said, no, at that time I was fond of eating sugar. So I had to see that I could do it. In fact, later in life, he was asked to give a succinct message to the people. And he said, my life is my message. He lived what he preached. The second saying that I will mention is, I am prepared to die for many causes, but I am not prepared to kill for any cause. For him, non-violence was the highest truth. It was the ultimate courage. The pillar of his philosophy was the strong belief that strength comes from truth, not might. That power comes from righteousness, not force. That victory comes from moral courage, not from imposed submission. I think the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi and the sayings of Mahatma Gandhi continue to resonate and echo to this day, and continue to inspire millions of people. This world can, of course, become a much better place, a more prosperous place, peaceful place to live in if Mahatma Gandhi's teachings were to be followed. I think the question to be asked today is not whether Gandhi is relevant today or not. The question that we need to answer is whether we have the moral courage and strength to emulate what the Mahatma preached and what he practiced. I would, with these few words, like to invite Ambassador Nazareth. He is a very distinguished member of the Indian Diplomatic Service and has worked as an ambassador to many countries. Since his retirement in the mid-90s, he has been writing and he's been talking and made a significant contribution to the promotion and propagation of Gandhian ideals and Gandhian values. So the floor is yours, Ambassador Nazareth. I would also like to thank Initiative Asia and Mr. Nasir Faridun, who have worked with the embassy to make this visit possible. Thank you.
Mr. and Mrs. Sajjanhar, Your Excellencies. I'm actually so amazed to see how many excellencies there are here this evening. Obviously, it's not because of me, but because of the high respect that you hold for Mahatma Gandhi. He has become such an icon all over the world. It's really amazing. Maybe I should begin by telling you why I got involved with Gandhi in my old age. While I was in the Foreign Service, as I went from country to country, I found at the highest level, presidents, prime ministers, foreign ministers, university presidents spoke with such great reverence of Mahatma Gandhi, about Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was being taught in universities like Harvard and Chicago. But not many Indians really knew about this. So already 800 books were written on Gandhi, so it seemed really quite ambitious and almost foolish that I should get into this exercise of writing another book on Gandhi. So I did this with great trepidation, and I said, if I'm going to write a book on Gandhi, it must be different to all other books that have been written. Now, whereas very many books have been written on Gandhi, there is hardly anyone, maybe one or two, who have specifically focused on his leadership. What was it that they made this man such a fearless leader? He was such a timid young fellow when he was, in school, college. He has gone to London, got himself a British legal degree. Anyone with a British legal degree would have been strutting around like a peacock all over in India. He goes to the court with his first case, some dear unfortunate old lady who gave him her brief. He goes in the court and he's trembling all over. He cannot utter a word. He records this in his autobiography. Everyone in the court was laughing, including the judge. But he says, there was nothing I could do because I forgot everything that there was in my nervousness. This man later becomes the fearless leader that he became. So fearless, in fact, for me, his most courageous act was to walk into Buckingham Palace dressed like the half-naked fakir that Churchill described him as. He goes like this to have tea with the King Emperor. And when he came out, the journalists were so shocked. They said, you went to have tea with the King Emperor dressed like this? The man smiles and he says, His Majesty was dressed enough for both of us. That was his self-confidence and his courage. I should say, his moment of transformation came when he was thrown out of that train. Until then, he was still very timid, and in fact, he went to South Africa because there he wouldn't have to, he thought, appear in court, etc. He was just asked to come to try and settle a case between two branches of a warring family over some property. So very happily went there. He is there just 1 week and he gets thrown out of a train. That was his transformational moment. And that is something that we need to focus on. What was it that made this timid little fellow, dressed in a three-piece suit, we would call him a wog, a Western-oriented gentleman, suddenly into the revolutionary he became? And for me, it is an amazing combination of the message of Krishna and the message of Christ. Both are very important inputs into Gandhi, spiritual inputs. The message of Krishna is contained in the Bhagavad Gita, the sermon on the Mount of Hinduism, if I may sort of describe it. Now, what is the message of the Bhagavad Gita? The message of the Bhagavad Gita is that when you are faced with injustice and evil, you just don't have an option. You have to stand up and confront it. Even if that evil that you see is embodied in your own family or your own brother, you have no option. Your duty is to stand up and confront it. But the other input, very important input, is Christ. He has read the Bible, deeply influenced by it, particularly the New Testament. What is the message of Christ? That it is through self-suffering that redemption will come. It is through your suffering that you will win over your opponent. And the two together is what makes Gandhi such a powerful revolutionary figure. In fact, the title of my talk is Gandhi, the Non-Violent Revolutionary. Now, in order to assess his achievement, one needs to know what was the scenario in which he functioned. This is best described by two people. One is Gene Sharp, the greatest living Gandhian scholar. The other is Will Durant. The former has written, Gene Sharp, Gandhi was the contemporary of Tsar Nicholas, Lenin and Stalin, Kaiser Wilhelm and Adolf Hitler, Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt, of the last emperor of China, of Sun Yat-sen, Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. He bridged the span between the time when wars were fought by armies with rifles to the time when they were fought with atom bombs. Durant, commenting on Asian developments in the 20th century's first half, has stated, China followed Sun Yat-sen, took up the sword, and fell into the arms of Japan. India, weaponless, accepted as her leader one of the strangest figures in history and gave to the world the unprecedented phenomena of a revolution led by a saint and waged without a gun. That sums up beautifully, I think, the scenario in which Gandhi functioned and the phenomenon that he was. Now, the greatest achievement of Gandhi, of course, was to get, not just to get India independence, but to mobilize a whole people who were so dispirited, who didn't see any hope, and at every stage were getting more and more impoverished. And he came with this esoteric message of peace and non-violence. We are going to bring down the British, we are going to persuade them to go with truth and non-violence. It must have seemed the most absurd gospel that anyone could bring. You know, and the British used to very proudly state, the sun never sets on the British Empire. In some ways, it was a very foolish and idle boast because the sun has set on every empire from earliest times today. But in one sense, it was very accurate because the empire extended all the way from Fiji in the east to Vancouver in the west. So every hour of the day, the sun was overhead on a British flag. So in that sense, it was very accurate because this was the most extensive empire the world has ever seen. Now here comes this dear gentleman and he says, truth and non-violence, and we will get them to leave. Amazingly, he succeeded. And his great achievement for me, that he managed to mobilize millions of people with this simple message by appealing, of course, to their own deep spiritual instincts. You know, Gandhi built on India's culture and India's spiritual heritage. Then he inspires them, he mobilizes them, he leads them, he fundraises for them, he negotiates on their behalf, and finally he gets them what they wanted. When I spoke at the Asian Institute of Management in the Philippines, I said this is the greatest management achievement of the 20th century, maybe of all time. It is just incredible that the man could do it. And basically what he was doing was what Abraham Lincoln had said 100 years later, that we have to show that right is might rather than might is right. That is the basic, simple gospel of Gandhi. Gandhi said, truth is God. When I was young and for many years I couldn't understand this. It seemed, we know that God is love, God is justice, God is this. But the truth is God just didn't make sense. But in fact, when you think about it, it is very accurate. Because what is truth? Truth is what is. When you tell someone, tell me what is the truth, it's not saying that, please tell me what actually happened. Now the only one reality which always is God. This is the only unchanging reality. Everything else changes. The only unchanging reality is God. the Supreme Spirit. In Hinduism, it's called the Mahashakti, the Supreme Energy. So in that sense too, Gandhi was very correct. And his whole approach was, if you stand up for truth, then God is on your side. So you cannot lose, because God cannot lose by definition. Of course, you might not live to see the success of your cause, but that's not important. The important thing is the cause. You should be willing to die for your cause. But as Ambassador Sajjanhar pointed out, Gandhi said that he was willing to die for the cause, but there was no cause for which he was willing to kill. That was the simple message, and a very effective message. Now, with this truth and non-violence approach, Gandhi in fact says that non-violent struggle is not a program for seizure of power. It is an effort to bring about a transformation of relationship. Abraham Lincoln had said the same thing about a year ago, about a century earlier. The best way to get rid of your enemy is to make him your friend. That was Gandhi's whole approach, to bring about a transformation of relationship. And he succeeded. Ultimately, the British just left, as he said. And the amazing thing was, as late as 1942, Churchill, who had described him as the half-naked fakir and a seditious inner temple lawyer, had proudly declared, I have not become the king, His Majesty's First Minister to preside over the dissolution of the British Empire. 5 years later, that's exactly what happened. What an amazing thing. But what are the first acts of independent India? Number one is to ask the last Viceroy of Britain, the hated symbol of the British Empire, to be its first Governor General. What an amazing thing. The next is to agree to join the British Commonwealth. But of course, on certain terms, which in fact brings about a complete transformation of that Commonwealth. Until then, it was a white man's club. And now India, brown country, 1/5 of the world population joins it. And the British monarch is no longer the legal sovereign. It's only a symbol of the unity of this new Commonwealth. Another transformation brought about completely non-violently and willingly on both sides. So Gandhi's whole approach was that in non-violent struggle, in fact he says 3/4 of the problems of the world would disappear if only we would put ourselves in the shoes of our opponents and find out what are their minimum requirements. So the important thing always is to find what are each other's position and find some way to bridge them. And he succeeded. Now everyone knows that he got India independent. Not very many people know his great, equally great, even greater achievements in the social revolution that he brought. In his pursuit of truth, welcome.
Thank you.
In his pursuit of truth, he saw all the evils in Indian society, the injustices. The greatest injustice of all was with what were then unfortunately called untouchables. 1/5 of India described as untouchables, who couldn't live within the village limits, who couldn't draw water from the village. Well, of course they couldn't go into the temple, they couldn't go to a school. And the only time they were sort of called upon was when a cow, the cow which he loved so much, we call the holy cow. When the cow dies, the holy cow, the cow we love so much, no one will touch it. Because the moment you touch a dead cow, you are polluted liturgically. So that is the point at which these people then are called in to clear the dead animal, to skin it. So they later became the tanner. And that was the meat on which the poor people lived. So Gandhi said, we have no right to tell the British they are treating us unfairly if we are going to treat 1/5 of our own people like this. And he refused to admit, because until then it was theologically justified. In fact, Arnold Toynbee described this as the worst of all social abuses, because there have been a whole lot of social abuses all over the world. But this one was cast in a, in a theological steel bands. It was stated, my friend, if you are in this position today because you've done some terrible things in your past life, so you better bear this patiently. It is your purgatory. And if you bear this patiently, your next birth, well, you will rise, little by little, or maybe very high if you bear this exception. So there was no escape from this. And Gandhi comes and refuses to admit that this is an essential part of Hinduism. In fact, he says, if anyone can prove to me that this is an essential part of Hindu theology, he said, I will be the first person to oppose it and to refuse to accept it. So he made the emancipation of the untouchables the other side of the coin of the national struggle. And his only physical armament, truth and non-violence, the two words, incidentally, as a manager, he was also a great innovator. Truth and non-violence had never been put together before. He made it two sides of the same coin. And he said the path to achievement of truth is non-violence. This was an innovation, and good managers are supposed to be good innovators. So in this way also, Gandhi is a great innovator. But other than these two words, truth and non-violence, his only physical armament was the charkha. Incredible, also absolutely brilliant innovation. Not many people realize that, they always see Gandhi dressed the way he was. They think he's some sort of an ascetic, good man, walk the streets. Not many people realize he was a highly educated person. He had not only studied law, he had read a whole lot of things, Tolstoy, Ruskin, Emerson, a whole lot. And he knew Indian history. In the past, India's core competence, to use another management term, was textiles. India had clothed the world with cottons and silks and, cashmeres and all that is this kind. Now, this had been destroyed, India's textile industry. Paul Kennedy writes about this, of how in 100 years, British textiles in India rise from a meager million or something yards imported into India. In 80 years has risen to 990 million yards. This is really what destroyed entirely the Indian textile industry, brought about unemployment all over. But the one advantage of this for the British was that now they had a lot of ready material to join the Indian army. And it was with British Indian armies that a lot of Southeast Asia and East Africa was subjugated. That is the amazing thing. However, so Gandhi therefore selects the charkha as his sort of, his mascot for the Indian liberation movement. And everyone, whether they had studied in Oxford or Cambridge like Nehru, or the untouchable was a member now of the national movement. One family, he got to stay in his own ashram. The daughter he adopted as his own daughter. A lot of high-class Indians, his financiers were absolutely shocked by this. They stopped financing. They said, all right, God will provide. And he kept going. Now, with this, everyone had to spend the charkha. By doing so, he suddenly brought equality between the high class, the low class, the men, the women, everyone. Everyone had to spend this, sitting side by side. Incredible, simple little devices, but revolutionary in their impact. The other thing is that as a result of all this, anyway, I'll come back to that later. The other thing was women in India. Women in India were never supposed to go out of their house except to the temple, to the market, maybe to the village well, and maybe, to visit another family or a wedding or something. The question of women walking on a street holding political placards was absolutely taboo. And I know when I grew up in my hometown of Mangalore, there was a lady called Mary Brito, was the first one who did this. My God, and I know all the comments in all the Mangalorean families. This woman is out of her head. She has become like a public woman, walking on a street holding placards. What nonsense is this? That was the whole attitude. But Gandhi said he didn't want an independence for India in which the women had not played an equal part. So he invited, you must come, you must join. Initially it was his own wife, Nehru's mother, Nehru's daughters and others who joined in. But little by little, others joined in. Initially they came only as volunteers when big Congress meetings were held. Later they became active revolutionaries. When Gandhi was arrested in 1942, 3 Indian women, one of whom died recently, a woman called Usha Mehta, set up a private radio called the Voice of Free India and operated themselves. What courage, I must say. So therefore, when Indian independence came, there was just no question. Women were given the right to vote. And if you think of how much women in Britain, how much Britain in the United States, wonderful constitution, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, God has created, all men equal. Women, of course, and blacks are excluded. But here, Indian women get the right to vote in 1950 when the constitution is introduced. I am told that in Switzerland they got it in the 60s. In Britain they got it after the First World War because women had made such a big contribution on the factory. And I think in the US it was 1927 or something. So that all of a sudden, half of India's population, most of them illiterate, are given the right to vote, is a revolutionary development. Similarly, when it comes to the untouchable, when independence was to come, Nehru was asked to set up an interim government. So he drew up a list and took it to show it to Gandhi and asked for his blessing. Gandhi had a look at it and he said, Ambedkar's name is not on it. Ambedkar was the leader of what those days was unfortunately called untouchables, now we call them Dalits. So he said, he's not in it. He said, why should he be in it? He's not a member of the Congress party. He has been saying the worst things about you and about me and about all the others. Gandhi tells him, Jawaharlal, independence is coming to India, not to the Congress party. So he therefore insisted Ambedkar should be included. Ambedkar was included. Highly qualified person, studied in Britain and in the US, Columbia University. A real legal and constitutional genius. So he becomes the first law minister of India. He is the one who drafts the Constitution of India. Prime Minister was the chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee. He was not the only one, but a number of them. And because he is there, he now writes into the Constitution a whole lot of positive discrimination measures in favor, of people like him. Today he is described as the architect of the India's constitution. He would have been there if it was not for Gandhi. Not many people know this. But what a tremendous transformation this has brought. Between 1992 and 1997 or 1997 to 2002, we had a Dalit President of India, a colleague of ours, a member of the Foreign Service. He had studied at the London School of Economics. Professor Lasky, who was his professor, was very impressed with him. And when he was leaving, he wrote a letter to Nehru to say, here's a very fine young man, do something for him. So Nehru was foreign minister, he put him in the Foreign Service. His first posting was Burma, where he met his future wife, they got married. From there he rose in the service, became ambassador to Turkey, ambassador to China, ambassador to the United States, came back, they made him Minister of Science and Technology. He became Vice President of India and President of India. A brilliant man. And he is a good example to show how much of talent there is at the lowest levels of our society, if only you will give them the opportunity to rise and to shine. Later we have had another president, Abdul Kalam, the most popular of all presidents, because every day he is in some school, some college, someone making a speech. His father was a boatman. As low as you can get. He became really the father of our rocket technology and missiles, and it's called the missile man. This is the sort of change that has come about in India. Another thing not very well known is, at the time of independence, there were 560 Rajas, Maharajas, etc., etc., Zamindars, Tamildars. The most feudal society that you could imagine. People living, royal lifestyles, when majority of people, the 1% against the 99% as you call today, starving, famines all over the place. And these people are building palaces, importing crystal from Europe. And you can even now go into some of these palaces which are hotels in Rajasthan. Even in the toilets, it's Royal Doulton that is used. And I'm not joking, you can go and check this. This was the India that we had. All of a sudden, this India is transformed. No one's head is chopped off, there's no guillotine or any equivalent anywhere around. Overnight, these people, some of them obviously didn't want this at all. They resisted it because they saw that with what was coming, they'd lose all their privilege. But they had no option because the national movement had caused such a euphoria among their own people. They knew that they didn't have an option. So they all decided, except for 3 states, one of which is the Kashmir, all decide to sign the instrument of accession, and you have a united India. Otherwise India could have been balkanized. That all this has been done without spilling a drop of blood is really what makes Gandhi's achievement really so very outstanding. I'd like to read out to you something which Professor Alan Brinkley of Columbia University has written. Most revolutions create enormous aspirations and never really fulfill them. Some betray them utterly. The American Revolution quickly drew boundaries around notions of freedom that were its inspiration, excluding African Americans, Native Americans, and to a considerable degree women. The French Revolution produced a frenzy of murderous courage, followed by nearly another century of monarchies. The Russian and Chinese revolutions created tyranny, oppression, and stagnation. Gandhi has been so mythologized since his assassination in 1948. The real man has almost disappeared, but he deserves his position as a resonant symbol of one of the most important phenomena of modern history, the simultaneous assault on colonialism and the oppression of individuals, which has transformed much of the 20th century world. And just see how much the 20th century world has changed since Gandhi's time. When India became independent, or a little before that, it became a member of the United Nations. It was the 54th member of the United Nations. Today there are 193. So it means all the others have become independent after India. And it's amazing that when a people realize and discover that even an unarmed people who are willing to die for their cause, but never to raise a hand in retaliation, they have learned a great lesson. In every case, the colonial master has been forced onto the negotiating table. Between 47 and 1997, more than 130 countries became independent. British, French, Belgian, German, etc. When I grew up, the world map was very simple. There were only 5 colors. Pink for the British, green for the French, blue I think for the Belgians or something. I don't know, some other color. Everything was just 5 colors. Now suddenly we are confronted with a very complicated international political geography, thanks to Gandhi. It is the largest democratization of the international political order the world has ever seen. I was ambassador in Egypt. I have dealt with President Mubarak, and I know how powerful he was. He was in fact called the Pharaoh. I never imagined in my lifetime I would see Mubarak brought down, later brought on a stretcher into a court to face charges of abuse of authority. All done by young people. It's really incredible. Of course, the same thing has happened earlier in Eastern Europe, where well-entrenched communist dictatorships have all been brought down through non-violent revolution. It begins in Poland. What was the immobilization? Initially, of course, in the shipyards, but they would sort of join apparently to say their rosaries. They were very fortunate, of course, in having a Polish Pope just at that time. But the important thing is to mobilize and not to be afraid to die. In fact, Gandhi, this timid little fellow, later develops this maxim: he who fears, fails. So the first thing you have to do is to get rid of fear. Now what has happened since Gandhi's time? Between 1980 and 2010, non-violent revolutions had politically empowered US blacks. Between 1980 and 2010, non-violent revolutions had politically empowered US blacks and put a black family and a black president in the White House. Ended apartheid in South Africa and transformed it into a rainbow polity based on universal adult franchise. Overthrown the Marcos dictatorship and given the Philippines its first and Asia's first woman head of state. Overthrown the Pinochet dictatorship and given Chile its and Latin America's first woman head of state. Given Bolivia its first Aymara, indigenous Bolivian head of state. Forced the resignation and exile of General Musharraf. It is called the Black Coat Revolution because it was all done by Pakistani lawyers. And restored democracy in Pakistan. Brought down all East European communist dictatorships and established democratic governments in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, German Democratic Republic, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Russia, Serbia, Georgia, and Ukraine. The Berlin Wall had been dismantled. Germany reunified. The Warsaw Pact scrapped, and many of its former members admitted to the European Union. In early 2011, non-violent revolutions brought down oppressive and seemingly unassailable dictatorships in Tunisia and Egypt. About the latter revolution, Niranjan Ramakrishnan wrote in an article titled Gandhi on the Nile. This is what he has written. The people of Egypt have just raised a political monument that will rank alongside their mightiest wonders of antiquity. They have shown the world a model exercise of peaceful, determined and dignified people power. 300 or more are said to have died in the struggle of the last 18 days. All of them were protesters, not one a representative of the hated regime. Instead of the suicide bombers for which the region has become renowned, this movement began with a single suicide. Instead of firebombing a building full of people, it began with one man in Tunisia setting fire to himself. Instead of clamoring for loaves and fishes, they stood firm on freedom, demanding nothing short of the dictator's exit. The people of Egypt have exploded something far bigger than an atom bomb. The myth that the Arab and Islamic worlds are unsuited for satyagraha. The Egyptian people have enacted a revolution that would have made Gandhi proud, but their victory is all their own. In the light of all this, one is struck by the validity and accuracy of Johann Galtung's affirmation. Gandhi was certainly a revolutionary, far more revolutionary than the piecemeal revolutionaries of Western civilization. Gandhi revolutionized revolution itself. Thank you for your attention. I don't know whether time permits and if the ambassador permits, but should there be any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Please go ahead. Yes, if there are any comments or questions.
Yes, yeah. Comments are fine. Contradictions are okay.
Ambassador Nazareth, I'm Kamala.
You are Kamala.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so happy to see
Yes,
you.
nice to meet you. And what do you think now in Egypt? My son looked in the, this is my son. Last he looked in the news, there were over 1 million people still in the square.
Yes, I know. It is sad. You know, in all these things, in all revolutions, various people sort of contribute to bring them around. But ultimately, it's the best organized who reap the benefits. I'm afraid this seems to be happening. I still hope it won't come to pass, but this seems to be happening over there. Because the Muslim Brotherhood is very well organized. It was set up in 1928, and from there it has spread all over. And the more they have been suppressed, the more determined they have become, and the more followers they have got. Now, if you want democracy, and if democracy brings up a particular group of people who the majority support, then we really have no right to complain. Democracy means the people must get what the people want. You know, we might not want it. We might not think that this is the right thing. There is great concern, particularly in Western capitals, of the way things have turned out, seem to be turning out in Egypt. To which I say, look at Turkey. Turkey is a highly Muslim country. And today, well, they're not supposed to be Islamists, but they have deep roots, deep connections with Islam, which they have the right. Islam is a great religion and has provided comfort and solace and hope to a whole lot of people. I myself think it is sad that when the Kemal Atatürk revolution took place, you know, there was a complete sort of cut-off from their past, and the whole attempt was to Europeanize. This is the great contrast with Gandhi. Gandhi built on India's roots, on India's spiritual traditions. He didn't try to westernize it, though there were people who wanted, you know, Western-style parliamentary democracy, etc. But it is because Gandhi built on India's own cultural roots and strengths that it has succeeded. And I am glad that it is now coming to pass in Turkey, because for a whole lot of people, I've traveled through Turkey, they are deeply religious people, and they have a right really to find the type of self-expression in Islamic terms that they deserve. And I believe today Turkey is showing that a predominantly Muslim country, like Indonesia is the other example, you know, can run a well-ordered, economically progressive government, really, if not under an Islamic banner, certainly with all the respect that Islam and the Islamic roots you know, deserve. May I just say that if any of you are interested in my lecture and would like to get a book that I've written on Gandhi, with the ambassador's permission, some of them are over here. I'm the author of the book, but none of the proceeds therefrom come to me. They all go to the trust to promote bringing out these books in other languages. Amazingly, the book has come out already in 4 Indian languages, in Portuguese and in Spanish. In fact, from here I'm flying to Mexico and to Brazil for the release of these books. It's coming out in Arabic, it is coming out in Urdu, and hopefully, maybe even in Chinese. So it only proves not that I'm a brilliant writer, but that there is a great demand for Gandhi in the world. Thank you. And thank you so much, Ambassador, for giving me the chance of delivering this lecture to such an important and distinguished audience.
But I think the last word has still not been said, because I saw a hand by the
yes,
Irish
please.
ambassador who wanted to say something.
The Spanish ambassador?
Irish ambassador.
Irish ambassador,
yes.
Just a short question, and it's about his profound statement by Mahatma Gandhi that truth is God, and could you give us slightly more insight into how he arrived at that. That's a revelation that he progressed to in his own experience.
The truth is God?
God.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure at what point actually, he began to define it that way. His whole focus initially was on truth and on non-violence. He put the two together, and he called it Satyagraha. Interestingly, Satyagraha, Gandhi is looked upon as a peacemaker, pacifist, etc. Actually, Gandhi was a militant. He always would force he would force a provocation. The whole strategy was to force your oppressor onto the negotiating table. It was a non-violent militant. That's why his militancy is described as non-violent militancy or war without violence. But he was a militant. Now, so therefore he put these two together, focused always on truth. And as he went along, he was deeply spiritual. While he was working for the independence of India, it was also the pursuit of his own spiritual evolution. And for me, the striking thing about Gandhi, he was a deeply religious man in a way, a deeply religious Hindu, who hardly ever went to a temple except to lead Dalits and untouchables into the temple to make a point. So Gandhi's religiosity actually was deeply spiritual quest. And that is why he is also so relevant to us. The tragedy of the world is there is too much of religion and too little spirituality. Religion is supposed to be an aid to spirituality, to help us to get to the mountain top. Instead of that, we are arguing and killing each other, saying, my prophet is greater than yours. It is so amazing. Gandhi often said, in heaven there are no religions. There is only a father and they are all his children. So this was his approach. Truth was what he gave primacy to. And in this, as he progressed spiritually, at some point, he said that, truth is God. And what amazes me is, one of my great achievements is to take Gandhi into army schools and into the National Defense College. This 18-day tour of mine is ending. My last lecture is in the National Defense College in Delhi. For the last 5 years, I've been invited every year to come and speak to these senior military officers. The lowest rank is a brigadier, to speak about Gandhi and what he did. And what amazed me was when I went for the first time into an army school, I found the motto, truth is God, on an army school. I said, is this only in this army school? He said, no sir, every army school in the country, this is the motto. How amazing. Did you know this? So that has left a deep impact on India, and I explained to you in what sense Gandhi had this, and the fact that it makes sense that God is the only truth that always is, which is the unchangeable truth, the ultimate reality. Thank you.
Is there, I think we can take one more question, last question if there is. Maybe two. I'll make an exception. Ambassador of Canada, please.
Thanks very much for that wonderful exposition. Enduring and profound legacy of Gandhi in the area of political justice, social justice. I wondered if you could comment upon his legacy in terms of economics, what sort of legacy there is, what sort of message you think prevails.
Actually, Gandhi had clear ideas on economics. And some eminent economists of that time, castigated, says Gandhi doesn't understand economics. Didn't say he didn't know economics. But amazingly today, a whole lot of books are being written on Gandhi, on his economic and management insights. The main thing I would say is that Gandhi wanted people to lead the simple life. And he said the more you are trying to acquire physical goods, the more problems you're creating for yourself. Happiness, he said, is a state of mind. You can own half the world and be unhappy you don't own the other half. On the other hand, you can say, this is what I believe, and that's enough for me. And all of a sudden you have found happiness. Because the desire and the temptation to acquire more and more is suddenly taken away. And today, this whole business of global warming and environmental destruction is all what Gandhi spoke about 100 years ago. His quote, his maxim, that the earth provides enough for every man's need, but not for every man's greed, is what's seen today. The other thing was he was very opposed to mass production. I was watching a TV news report in various parts about the wastage of food in the United States. Because they are mass producing food, everything has an expiry date. It might be in perfect condition. The expiry date is reached, it's illegal to sell it. And in this one, we saw poor families showing how they've gone to the garbage bin, just before Christmas, and picked up whole turkeys and a whole lot of other things. Perfect condition. Only the date has expired. And the figure they mentioned was mind-boggling. It was something like $900 million of food thrown away, while millions in other parts of the world are starving. This is the type of mass production that Gandhi was opposed to. This business of consumerism, sadly, it's come to India. Everywhere, there are new malls going up. With the smartest shops, to me, some of them look like streets in Paris. There is a shop in Bangalore selling suits, where the minimum price suit is 60,000 rupees. It's a hell of a lot of money in India. But you still have people buying them, because it's a good conversation piece. You can go around the party and say, my suit is from Folio. This is the new type of arrogance that we have developed. And I believe it's creating a lot of problems for ourselves. And what is happening is the large divides between the rich and the poor. Since I'm retired now, I can speak the truth. But there are serious problems in India. We have got a rural militancy called the Naxal movement, which are active today in 200 districts of the country. It's 1/3 of the total number of districts in the country. Trains are being hijacked, our policemen are being killed, something like that. Why are they doing it? They know when they take to the gun, there are 9 chances out of 10 you will get killed in it. But if people really are reduced to some level of desperation, I was also out in Mexico, ambassador to Mexico, and there's a Zapata saying that it's better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. Now, therefore, unless we look at the poorest of the poor, and this was one of Gandhi's important maxim that advised to India's rulers, whenever you are thinking of some new policy, recall the face of the poorest man you have seen, and ask yourself the simple question, whether what you now contemplate on doing, whether it will do any good to him. But today when people talk about development with the human face normally comes to mind of the fat corporate cat, because he is the one who is making all the donations to the party. That is the sadness. And not only in India, but in a whole lot of countries. It's happening in China, it's happening in various other countries too. So ultimately, democracy must mean that the poorest and the weakest must have an equal chance as everyone else. That is Gandhi in essence. Thank you.
I think the last question we have.
My name is John Beeklund. I'm having a website for 20 years on Gandhi Today. Gandhi
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that.
And for the several years now, I've been developing a friendship with Afghan youth.
Yeah.
And they are holding Gandhiji very dear to their hearts.
Really?
Yes. So they are starting this movement, the Afghan Youth Peace Volunteers.
I'm so glad to hear that. I'd like to talk to you.
Yes,
Yeah.
we should talk.
Yeah.
Because also, I discovered, also in connection to them, you know, Badsha Khan.
Yeah, Badsha Khan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make people more aware that Gandhi has his parallel in Islam also.
Very much so.
Yeah.
In fact, what I also read out, you know, there is a sort of an impression, some of it motivated, to show that, you know, all this would never work in an Islamic country. That Islam, you meet Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, in fact he said, I've read the Quran so many times. It's only after I met Gandhi for the first time that I realized what is the real meaning of the Quran. And Gandhi had the highest respect for the Quran. The three holy books were always with him, were the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, and the Quran. Yeah, and one of the things I believe that he got from the Quran is the great emphasis on justice. You know, justice, what is important. Incidentally, I'm going to distribute to all of you some bookmarks that I brought. Simple device in which we are trying to promote Gandhian thoughts. Gandhi quotation on one side and the calendar for 2012 on the other, to make sure you keep it at least till the end of the year. Now, I think this one says that peace will come where truth is pursued, and truth implies justice. And this is what is needed, because so much of what is happening in the world today, it is injustice. It's the will of the strong being forced onto the weak. That is the point. The other thing is, if you look around at all our major problems, since just even in this millennium, it's related to a simple thing, that the man at the top doesn't speak the truth. Countries are being taken to war on the basis of blatant untruths. In every one of our countries, you see that. In the corporate world, there's a whole new profession, it's called the spin master, who puts a spin on truth. And then, you know, untruth like a top. The back becomes the front becomes the back, so untruth suddenly looks like truth. In the corporate world, you have seen what has happened. I believe that the financial meltdown of 2008 is far more serious than the attack 9/11. There, 3,000 or more people lost their life. Here, millions have lost all their savings. And this new theory that you are too big to fail. So the important thing is to become very big, because they will not allow you to fail. Everyone else can lose all their savings. That is the that's the tragedy. Yes.
Well, I think that brings us to an end of the formal part of the evening, and on behalf of each and every one of you, let me thank Ambassador Nazareth for a very stimulating I think he has very rightly said that interest in Gandhi is, there's a resurgence in the interest in Gandhi, because again, the sayings and teachings of Gandhi are relevant not for the time only that he said them, because in one of his sayings, in one of his teachings, he said, what I am saying is nothing new. It's as old as the hills.
That's right.
And what he taught about love, what he taught about truth, about justice, he was just putting, as Ambassador Nazareth said, the real strength and the force was that he was able to mobilize and motivate a whole country. And even when he was fighting for the freedom of India, he was fighting for the freedom of the oppressed all over the world.
Exactly.
And it was not only in India. And I think that is what is being reflected in the 60 years after Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, whether it was Martin Luther King, whether it was Dalai Lama, whether it is now Aung San Suu Kyi, or the others. I think his teachings are inspiring and motivating, and will continue to inspire and motivate. And thank you very much for being here with us this evening. I think it's been a wonderful occasion, and there'll be great opportunity now to talk informally amongst all of us, and anyone who wishes to consult and who wishes to speak to Ambassador Nazareth, he's here. And of course we have some Indian cuisine and some Indian food for you. So please stay and enjoy yourself. Thank you once again for coming and being with us this evening. Thank you.
I'm a talkative fellow. I hope I didn't talk too much.
No. Please. Yes, we have one announcement for you. Yes, that's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, to say, sir, that I was not motivated by this talk would be an understatement. So I fearlessly announced 2 events which are going to come up in the coming week. I know the friends from Foreign Ministry are smiling, but for you it is useful repetition. You heard this one earlier. The first one is around the corner on Sunday, which is an annual charity event called the International Bazaar, being organized by the Diplomatic Women's Club at Elite Palace Hotel, St. Eric's Gata. And 35 countries are participating, each with their stalls, having artifacts and food and handicrafts, etc. A full day of cultural events from all these countries, and of course, very importantly, that the ticket costs 50 kroners, which is with Zivile now. She's the moving beatbox, and this also doubles up as a raffle ticket, and they're extremely attractive prices to very popular destinations in Europe and Asia, and so you must go for that.
More than 60 of them.
More than 60 of them. Thank you,
So
sir.
you have a very good chance.
You have a very good, and apart from that, other gifts which are really, really good. Okay, and the last part is importantly that the proceeds are going to go for a very noble cause, the well-known NGO, Save the Children, Sweden. So please participate. And the second one is an old promise which the ambassador has kept, and which is a Bollywood event at Sodra Theatre on the 27th of April at 7 p.m. And it's a very famous group, well-traveled all over the world. It's a 12-member young boys and girls who are going to perform on very catchy Bollywood numbers. And of course the tickets, my last input is that there are very few tickets now left, so you may like to sort of book them online at Sodra Theatre, or when you can get to the embassy if you need them from us. So thank you very much.